Innovation Strive. Today I have the pleasure of Heather Jerrehian. I don't know if I said that right, Heather, but I'm sure you'll correct me. Good afternoon or good morning to you, Heather.
Hey, Julian, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So you are an entrepreneurial futurist and investor who has driven innovation and go-to-market strategies for startups and Fortune 500 companies over the last 2 decades. And as a serial founder and tech executive, you've led turnarounds at unprecedented speed, scaled 10 times growth, and engineered profitable exits, including the acquisition of Hitch by ServiceNow under your leadership as a CEO. And you are the co-author of Sail to Scale, Steer Your Startup Clear of Mistakes from Launch to Exits. That was launched last year. Guiding entrepreneurs in navigating the complexities of business scaling. And we're going to be talking about and exploring the future of work and navigating the impacts of AI on your workforce and why talent visibility is critical to maintaining business agility. But before we get into that, Heather, I'd like to ask you, what do you love about what you do?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. And you know what's so interesting? I always think about what is it that I love to do? Well, I love to work because work is not work to me. I love, working on cutting edge technology that's helping people and organizations really to unlock potential that they didn't even know they had. So as you mentioned, like I have spent well over a couple decades in the tech industry as a serial entrepreneur, executive investor. But throughout my career, I've been deeply passionate about solving these really big, complex challenges and, turning them into these transformational opportunities. And that's really sort of what inspired me to write the book, Sail to Scale, that I wrote with 2 co-authors. It was really about what we call navigating the 4 waves of startup growth, which is launch, pivot, scale, and exit. And because we have seen the same mistakes over and over again, each of us sitting from a different viewpoint in companies, but we've seen these same mistakes. So we've really created sort of this guidebook for founders, leaders, even entrepreneurs, which is actually, or I should say, intrapreneurs. And that's really the experience I'm currently having. Hitch was a skills intelligence platform, was acquired by ServiceNow. And we not only re-platform, but we've built this whole new product on top of it, this talent development product. And it's a whole new market. And so similar to any, entrepreneurial venture, we are figuring out, how do you bring this to market? What's resonating with the customer? Where do we need to pivot? And so that's what I really am so passionate about doing is, taking an idea and bringing it to form, and really from the intersection of people and technology. And particularly right now, I think we're in a once in a generation situation. The pace of change is just relentless at this point. But my firm belief is that AI can enhance human potential rather than replace it. And I know there's a lot of conversations right now and a lot of fear out there, but I really see this synergy between the people and the technology. And so that's really what I love that I get to do every day.
It sounds like your journey is ever evolving, and it sounds like you're walking the talk with your book right now as well, continually, which is fantastic. What is thinking about AI? What is the biggest misconception that leaders have about AI now in their impact on the workforce?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we did some research last year about the impacts of AI, and it's really about, day-to-day tasks that people do and what gets augmented versus automated. And the question I'm always asked is like, will AI take our jobs? And, while many people fear that AI will replace their work, I actually believe that AI makes work actually more human. So the more that we allow the machines to do what they do best, which is, taking on those mundane and repetitive tasks, it allows us to do what is innately human, and it frees us up to do that higher value work. And I actually love to say it's sort of like human skills are the new power skills. So that's like allowing us to focus on core human skills, communication, creativity, or complex problem solving. And so these are the things that we need to be thinking about. But it's hard, right? It's the human dynamic. There's a lot of fear right now, and I understand it. This is new. It's new for all of us, right? It's not like one organization has this figured out. And what's even really interesting is when you think about the leaders on the bleeding edge of this technology, when they're out there on the stage saying this is happening even faster than we expected, like this is real, right? Like there's a real excitement. But there, with that excitement, there's fear, and because we're all humans, right? And so I think that's where I'm trying to balance that fear with how is this an enabler? How is this allowing us to do more of the things that we want to do on a day-to-day basis?
It's like a lot of things when there's fear, we sort of close down. We go into that fight or flight, don't we? We try and protect
Yeah.
ourselves. We go into survival mode, and we don't listen, we don't hear, we don't embrace. If you're in an organization and there's that sort of fear happening within leadership about AI and the impact it may have, or even from the employees, how can we sort of help, I suppose, take that fear away, or enlighten people that actually there's not shouldn't be any fear in this? Almost, how should we embrace this, and how should we sort of help people to sort of overcome that in their sort of day to day?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I think this is a massive change management effort, right? And so often companies, like I think about, us and the products that we sell into our customers, and it's one thing to have the technology. You have the change management. Have you prepared people for what this technology will do? And sort of like a trend that I'm seeing is, if you think about the multi-generations working together right now, I feel like there's like this 360 mentoring that is happening, where you've got the earlier generation really helping, right? Those of us who are more mature to really understand and adapt technology, because they've grown up with this. This is they're more wanting to experiment. They're wanting to get their hands in it. Whereas we've got a lot of people now coming into the workforce, and will be in the future coming in, where if technology and AI is taking on a lot of that, like, foundational, like, early in career work, I guess I would say, right? They're actually missing some of the opportunity of learning some of those skills that you learn at the beginning of your career. If AI is doing it now, it's incumbent upon the older generation to kind of help bring that institutional knowledge, share with the younger generation what's the process and how these things work, and also developing sort of that critical thinking of, understanding how to problem like that. And so I see this as like we're all kind of learning together. And I also think of this as like, when I thought, thinking about the book, like this is the great pivot. We're all in a state of change, and it's like an arms race. Like things are moving so quickly, but we can't forget about the people. You got to bring the people along. And the other analogy I like to think of, I was explaining to someone who is more mature like myself, of like remembering when I posted on social for the first time. I remember that really distinctly, because I posted and then I was like, just like panicked after I hit, post, and you're like, oh my God, I feel so vulnerable. What have I said? What are people going to think? And it's just this like overwhelming feeling. And then you did it once, and you do it a few more times. And then before you know it, now it's second nature. It's the same thing of when we learned how to drive a car, right? Like it was so scary in the beginning. And then to up the ante, remember the first time you merged onto the freeway? I remember it's like white knuckling. I don't even think I barely looked. I just was like driving, going like, oh my gosh. Now we just like naturally merge onto the freeway. It's not a big deal. So I think we just need to kind of think again about the humanness in this, and the human dynamic, and bring people along. But we need to bring people along also acknowledging that there's a pace of change that's happening. So it's really trying to, again, figure out that people and technology and that right balance.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's almost having that mindset in an organization now, that it's like a change management, because it's going at such a pace.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of there is the multi sort of generations now within the workforce, of almost helping each other, mentoring in from different perspectives, because I think that's really helpful. and also a good way of creating that sort of getting those different perspectives and understandings, and working really well, and sort of valuing each other more rather than seeing people as a threat, or you're old and fuddy or mature, you don't know things now, but actually, or you're
Yeah.
young and you don't know anything, and all that. It's actually working together and almost that peer-to-peer support. And I think that's really healthy.
Yes.
What skills do you believe will become more valuable as AI becomes more sort of prevalent within the workforce?
Yeah, so like I said, it's really like those human skills, and this is the opportunity. And so, like, just going from some of the research that we did when we looked at our own ServiceNow ecosystem, we looked at what is the impacts of AI, and we found that in our ecosystem, the system administrator is going to have the greatest potential to save time, and it's like 14 hours per week. So if you imagine a 40-hour work week, that's like 34% over the next few years of time that's going to free up. And when we looked at it closer and we looked at the 39 discrete tasks that people do on a day-to-day basis, over time, we see how maybe they all remain, but some of them get really compressed. And so you have to think about, like, how do you start to reallocate that time to higher value tasks, or allow individuals to reskill and upskill into new roles, right? And or maybe it's gaining new product knowledge or doing a stretch project. So when you start to think about the opportunity that this is opening up for individuals, um, it's pretty tremendous. And when you think about another point for people and companies to think about, is when you connect the dot between the skills that can transfer from one role to another, because skills are transferable. And so one example I like to give from our ecosystem is roles that are maybe going to be decreasing in demand, like an account management specialist. When we looked at that, it actually is a skills match in the 85th percentile to a technical project manager, which we know is going to be in very high demand in the future. And when we broke it down and we looked at all the individual skills, I think it was like there was like no gap, with like 29% of the skills related to that role. And in the middle, there was like a small gap with like 50% of the skills, but they were human skills and skills that you can learn on the job. And so it left like this, like 20% of skills, like 3 or 4 skills, that is like a clear blueprint of how you would upskill somebody going from this non-tech role into this high demand tech role. And so this is where it starts to free up time and opportunity and potential for people. And so it becomes like this really powerful thing for people to start thinking about. It's not just those hard skills, but like, what are those human skills you have, and how is that going to help you in thinking about what direction you want to go in your career?
I mean, you're talking about talent visibility there, aren't you? Almost going through an
Yeah.
organization, and you went through it very quickly. How does an organization, or a team, how do they sort of go about identifying those sort of skills that could be used from an AI perspective, and what can be more human? What would be the start point for that?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I have sort of come up with this framework called the 4-dimensional workforce. And it's exactly what you said. It's like, to build an AI capable workforce, it absolutely starts with visibility to your talent. And what is so interesting, and this is why I call it the 4 dimensions of the workforce, is most companies are at that first dimension where they really don't know who they have. Like, they know the names and titles of people in their company, but there's no intelligence behind, okay, what does that tell me if I know the title of someone? So really, when you get to that second dimension, it's really when you're starting to look at, okay, what are those roles and skills I have within my company? So starting to work on your job architecture. So you may have a job family of software engineers, but it's not just what are the software engineers, it's what flavor of software engineer, because you can have a front-end engineer, a QE engineer, a data engineer. And across software engineering, you might have a group of core skills that are related to that role. But again, when you start to look at more the specialization of that type of engineer, what are the additional skills that make that role unique? That's like the beginning of getting to that second dimension, where you're starting to see more of the role and the skills. But the part that really starts to unlock it is when you get the employee involved, right? I call like the skills profile the birthplace of skills, because this is really where not only do you know from the title or the role that someone's doing, like those core skills that are related to it, but if you start to think about someone bringing in all their rich history, right? Their resume, like where have they worked previously? What are those skills? Or even what is someone's hobby, right? That might be a really valuable skill that, again, in an organization, being able to see that whole person, it really starts to unlock talent that you don't even know you have in your organization. And really, when you get to the third dimension, this is really when you're starting to take that visibility of your talent and the skills, but then layering in what is your corporate strategy? Where are you today? What's your vision of where you need to go to future proof your organization? And you start to connect these dots. And the fourth dimension is really kind of what I was talking about with that research, which is the time and the impacts of AI. So it's no longer, 3, 5, 10-year plans. The pace of change now is what's going to be.
Oh, what?
Again. Are
Hello
we?
there.
Hi, I don't see.
We're still live. Carry on.
We're still live. Okay, sorry, that was a little bit of a blip. But what I was saying is getting to that fourth dimension and really understanding that it's no longer 3, 5, 10-year plans. It's really about what's happening over the next 9, 12, 18, 24 months from now. And as organizations start bringing in more AI into their organizations, again, it gets to that visibility of not just skills, but what's the day-to-day work? What are the tasks that are getting disrupted? And you really need to understand all of that to get to that fourth dimension. It's sort of this, being able to understand all this, because this is really what unlocks that human potential and the potential in an organization to really accelerate the pace of work that they're doing.
It seems to me by involving the employee, obviously you get a greater insights into who they are, what they are, but also creating that sense of adding value, contributing, but they're part of the journey. They feel involved, and therefore take lessons the fear, lessons the unknown, because they're part of that process.
Yeah.
And I guess also, if you're then mapping, what can be out of their role can be done through AI, which obviously would save them time, is I suppose having a real sense of, we're not going to take your 10 hours that we've saved through AI and reduce your contract. We're going to see what we can do to bring some value to that. I guess that's the approach, I think, because I think some people might be thinking, okay, they've taken my hours to 30 hours. I'm only getting paid now 30 hours instead of 40 hours or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
How do we alleviate that? And is that the sort of the approach you're thinking? And then you dial up with more of the human skills that are needed.
Yeah. Well, I think this is really where, organizations have to bring their people strategy together with a tech-enabled solution. So for me and what I'm building, I mean, this is really bringing together a growth and development solution with skills intelligence that can provide these AI-driven recommendations. So it's really understanding from an employee's perspective, what are their aspirations? How do they want to grow? How do they like to grow, right? Is it micro learning? Is it growth through mentorship? Is it growth through doing a project? And as that time gets freed up, what are the different, not only ways they can work, but when they do some type of learning, how do you capture that in the system, right? Because you need something that's dynamically updating in the flow of work, where people work, to really be able to understand at your organizational level, right? Because as a manager and as a leader, you need to understand, who do you have on your team? What are the skills they have? What are the gaps? And then how can you really help support your employees? And I know every leader that I talk to, I work with a lot of customers and am out speaking a lot. everyone is asking, like, where do the AI skills sit in our company, right? Every CEO, every board meeting, they're like, do we have the right AI skills in our company? And again, this goes back to those transferable skills. If you don't have all the quote AI, Gen AI, prompt engineering, like all the skills that you may need, what are the closest transferable skills where you can start to look at a population of people in your organization? And again, they might be spread out all over the organization, but how do you bring those people together and start upskilling, reskilling them to get to the skills that you need to future-proof your organization? So this is really where, again, the employee is important, because the employee, like, you need that information, you need them engaged, there's got to be something in it for them, right? Because employees no longer want to just fill out yet another profile, or another set of goals that doesn't go anywhere. Like, they really need something that's interactive, that feels like we're making an investment in them. And I think that's really important, is that employee experience, that we're helping them to learn, grow, develop. I mean, they're hungry for that. And they need those development tools, and they need to know the company's investing in them.
I think in all this, it's that the aim of all this is to become a better a better business, more profitable, faster, more innovative, more opportunities to create more collaborations and to open things up. How does that better talent visibility translate then into that increased sort of business agility?
Yeah, well, I think the companies who get that visibility, first of all, are going to have a leg up. And again, when you think about the 4 dimensions, I said the majority of companies are at that first dimension. Some are dabbling in that second dimension of really building out their job architecture, implementing software that can help them understand the skills. But if you think about that paired with, like I said, getting to that 4th dimension, right? This is not something to dabble in now. You really need to get started on understanding who you have. Because again, as you bring AI into your organization and it starts to impact the work and the day-to-day tasks that people are doing, you can't unlock that benefit, that potential for yourself as an organization and for your employees without understanding how to harness that, and then how to direct it in a way that supports the employee but supports the organization, again, in the corporate strategy and that vision of where you want to go. And again, you've got leaders from Microsoft who are saying that, like, SaaS is dead, applications are no longer going to be needed. And so it means that, and whether that's true or not, it's to be seen. But the point is that the way we've worked, the way that we've been doing business is changing. And so the organizations that can adapt quickly and adjust their people, their processes, their technology are going to be the ones that succeed. And I also think it really comes, again, the key part to that is that human element, that change management. The companies that can connect all those dots are the ones that are going to succeed. And I think, I mean, you coach a lot of CEOs, you've written a book, like, this, like, that part is really hard. Helping people and organizations thrive is not easy when you've got the pressures that are just, again, like, it's relentless change. But if you can harness it in a way and really look at this as, like, this is exciting, we get to do really exciting things, that changes the energy around it. But it's that visibility that's just critically important for organizations.
Yeah, and I think it's that, as you say, mindset, isn't it? That there's opportunities here. I think people do sort of shifting from that danger of AI. Actually, there's an opportunity here to embrace within our organization that can actually make our employees really felt me more valued for their human skills, for who they are, not to sort of replace them or do anything that would sort of bring them down. What have you found from your experience or your observations, the sort of common sort of pitfalls that leaders should avoid when they're trying to implement this approach from sort of this talent visibility to introducing more AI within their organization?
Yeah, so I think one of the pitfalls that I'm starting to hear and see, I see it in our own organization as I'm building a product. I see it, and it's really about having that governance around responsible, ethical AI. And, that's a really big discussion because you're now having AI. And again, when you think about agentic AI, of having autonomous agents starting to go and do work independently, like this changes things. You've got digital workers working alongside human workers. And so this is something that I think is another major topic that organizations are trying to understand for themselves. Depending on where you're located in the world, right? There might be regulations in your country that you need to abide by. You've global teams, so it might be different in different parts of the world. And I think that paired with, what I was saying about, having the right technology, having the right change management, but also having the right governance and understanding how to be responsible with all of this. And particularly in the world that I sit in, we have models and algorithms that are guiding people, they're providing recommendations. And are we, have we taken the care as we've, created those algorithms to make sure that we're removing bias from them? And, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of documentation and being able to have the explainability of how these things work so that we know for ourselves what's happening, but also for, like I'm thinking of our customers, they need to know that we have the diligence there on, having a really solid practice and governance around this topic.
And as a final question, we have a lot of leaders obviously listen to this podcast. What would be your, I suppose, advice to them if they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all these changes, the pace of change, and the changes that they've got to try and embrace, particularly, say, this year?
So I think what I would say is, this is not going to be perfect. It's so important to get started. It's so important to start testing on your own. I've started incorporating AI wherever I can in the work that I do. I hear a lot of, my employees saying, I feel like I'm cheating. I'm using AI. And it's like, no, you're not cheating. You're actually accelerating the work that you're doing. This is a good thing. And so I think it's educating yourself. It's becoming familiar with it. And I think it's also having human to human conversations with other leaders. I just had lunch with someone this week, and she was talking about kind of how she's bringing AI into her organization and sort of helping to lead the charge of teaching this massive group of people of what does AI mean for them? What does it mean personally? What does it mean professionally? And where can you start to incorporate it? I'm sort of dabbling with thinking of putting sort of like an AI think tank together because I have questions and I want to learn from others and trying to figure out how are they thinking about this? What are they using that's working? So I think this is kind of like, like group learning. So sort of like I said, the 360 mentoring, I think it's spending a lot of time mind sharing and sharing best practices with each other. I mean, I think we're seeing it across, large organizations. And again, when you think about like the governance of all of this, we as a global community are also talking about this and what's right or wrong and really having discussions and really need to we're paving the road. There's no path to follow. We're really having to answer these questions. But I think the important part is, don't get paralyzed by fear. Understand this is a really strong enabler. There's so much goodness that comes out of this. Again, there's just that, those strong human skills that really is going to help people be successful. And I think you kind of have to be a fearless leader. And like I said, go and test some of this yourself, but, be human about it. Create a group, talk with other colleagues or people at other organizations. It's been, connecting with you, exchanging ideas. This is how we're all going to learn.
Yeah, and I think it's not feeling you have to know all the answers and know all how it works, because I think that's really healthy as well. And I think I remember when going back to COVID, which is 5 years ago now, it was okay for people not to know what to do, because that's fine. As a leader, it's okay. But actually, there might be people in your organization, and as you say, it might be people outside your organization in your industry. and build those sort of networks, isn't it, that can help you have those conversations. And like you say, you had lunch with somebody and you're discussing how you're using AI. And I think it's just that healthy openness about how you can approach this, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And you said, I can't believe COVID's been 5 years ago, but COVID was kind of like the great equalizer where everybody in the globe was impacted by COVID. It wasn't like it was by industry or a particular country. Everyone was impacted. And what we learned from that was, wow, we all figured it out together. And this is no different. We are all figuring this out together. And I think the important thing is find leaders that you trust and really value their thought leadership, because those are the people you want to stick with and kind of use them as the one holding the flashlight and guiding you on the path. And like I said, an experiment and have fun with it.
Yeah, well, thank you for your insights, Heather. It's been really helpful, and I'm sure leaders listening to this right now will be more inspired about and embracing AI within their workforce. I'm sure they're already doing it, but even more, go for it. How can people connect with you, get in touch with you? What's the best way of doing that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. So the normal URL, and then Heather Jerrehian. I'm on X, which is @Jerrehian. And for those interested in the book, like I said, it's not just for founders, it's for leaders and investors and entrepreneurs. It's Sail to Scale, like sail like the boat, to scale.com. And the book is also available on Amazon.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming on the show.